Hi, and welcome to Z Games. Recorded live at 4ZZZ Studios in Brisbane and broadcast nationally over the Community Radio Network, Z Games brings you the latest gaming news, reviews and interviews from across Australia and around the world.
Welcome once again to another excellent episode of Z Games, Australia's most beloved gaming radio show, coming to you live from the 4ZZZ Studios in Brisbane and possibly around the nation on the Community Radio Network. I'm Lee, and in the studio for this episode we have Razor.
Hi.
Jody Macgregor.
Hello.
And special guest panelist Tim Dawson of Witchbeam, who are working on Assault Android Cactus. Tim is here because, Jody, I understand that Candy is sick and, may never come back. So, yeah. So
yeah, get well soon, Candy.
Yeah.
Lee doesn't care if you die.
She would feel the same about me.
Fair.
But now we have Tim, who is an exceptional designer who will be able to basically pick apart all of our arguments and our reviews today. So feel intimidated by him. What else are we talking about on this show, Razor?
Jody, you have been playing Pillars of Eternity.
Yeah, I have the big old-fashioned fantasy role-playing game that I just finished this morning, 50 hours.
Oof.
So that's my last entire week.
Seems like you've had a shower this week, Jody.
I had one afterwards.
Yeah, because I can't smell anything.
Good.
Good work, Ray.
Thanks. Lee, you've been playing Bloodborne.
I have, yes. The spiritual successor to the Dark Souls games, which is a PS4 exclusive. It's by From Software. I've been really digging it. You've been playing it as well.
Yeah.
Not quite in the same camp.
Yeah, well, it's pretty punishing. It's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've heard that, it's a really excellent game, but I just can't see it from my vantage point.
Right.
So hopefully a bit more time with it this week will sway me.
Tim, do you have any opinions on Bloodborne?
It's very high on my list of games that I would like to play if I wasn't an indie developer right now.
Excellent. Okay, between now and when we do our first impressions, write down some more.
But let's kick this episode off with the week in gaming news headlines. Mr. Jody Macgregor?
A Pac-Man minigame has been added to Google Maps as an April Fool's Day gag. Users can select a small region of any urban area on Earth, which will then be converted into a playable Pac-Man game. Last year, Google Maps celebrated April Fool's Day with a Pokemon-themed game.
That's really exciting. I love Pac-Man. It's my jam.
Yeah, I want to get home and play Pac-Man in Fortitude Valley.
Yes.
And eat a bunch of drunk people. Is that like instead of the cherry showing up at the middle, it's just like a bottle of Koopas?
Yeah. I wonder if, I saw Cliff Bleszinski was playing Pac-Man in the graveyard where his father was buried. That's the detail that I've got, which is great because then the ghosts that you're eating are actual dead people ghosts. Eh?
Yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah, it is.
It's kind of dark.
Mm-hmm.
Sony Pictures has named a writer for the Metal Gear Solid film. British screenwriter Jay Basu, whose only major film credit is the poorly received Monsters Dark Continent, will write the film, which is in pre-production with no director or lead actor attached.
I'd like to give a shout out to the big Hollywood motion picture makers. There's a guy called David Hayter. Now he's awesome. He was the voice of Solid Snake for all of the games, and he also wrote X-Men 2.
Ah.
So yeah, look, there's a guy out there that's perfect for it. Who's this Jay Basu guy?
Has he written 75% of a good film like X-Men 2? Tim, would you be willing to have Assault Android Cactus made into something for the big screen?
That would be quite an adaptation, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. I'm liking this almost return to the Super Mario Brothers style of kind of just get it done movie adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of.
Bob Hoskins did not even know that was a video game.
That's so good.
Until much later, one of his kids told him. He had no idea.
Is that true?
That's true.
Oh my god.
It's believable.
Yeah.
Ready Player One, a novel about virtual reality that also functions as a love letter to video games and the 80s, is set to become a feature film, with Steven Spielberg on board to direct. Avengers writer Zach Penn is also involved. He and the novel's writer Ernest Cline previously worked together on Atari Game Over, a documentary about the excavation of buried ET cartridges in the New Mexico desert that were buried there after the video game crash of the 80s.
That is a good get.
Have you guys read that book yet?
No, it's on the list, though.
Yeah. I read it. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's a bit too self-indulgent, I think, which kind of makes it good. But it's basically this guy just peppering his novel with every pop culture reference he can to the 80s. Like there's like references to the old game Joust. That's a very prominent game that's featured in it. Like Back to the Future, movies like that, and just also music and films and video games from that period. Like there's so many, dozens, maybe hundreds of them. So when I thought about the possibility of this game becoming this book becoming a film, I thought that's going to be a licensing nightmare. It's going to be just obscene to get everyone, all those copyright holders, like to agree to make this film. But I found out that Warner Brothers is actually the distributor of this, and they did the Lego movie, which kind of weaved all those properties together, like DC and Star Wars and the Ninja Turtles really well. So that actually makes me a little bit hopeful. Maybe they will actually pull this off.
So if you see like Pixels, obviously everyone's kind of coming together in a big licensing sell-off, I think, at the moment.
Yeah.
It's a fire sale.
You can get those Atari properties cheap.
Yeah.
So
it's like, you want to make mobile games? Nintendo got your back.
I guess fingers crossed then, like Ready Player One is going to make up for Pixels. Which I saw the trailer without sound because I didn't want to hear Adam Sandler's voice and I was still repulsed.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I like that part when Pac-Man's creator sort of comes face to face with Pac-Man, the giant Pac-Man. I don't know. I thought that was kind of cute.
Yeah.
It's like and I like how they, the giant, difficult to maneuver joke that they just slid into that scene. It's like, I worry a little bit about that film.
Yeah.
It's going to be awful.
The Legend of Zelda game for the Wii U has been delayed until 2016. Originally scheduled for a late 2015 release, the delay is due to the development team discovering new gameplay possibilities that weren't planned from the outset. Nintendo has also announced that they will not demonstrate the title at this year's E3 convention.
I'm crying about this.
Oh.
It would look so good. I want it. And we found new gameplay. Is that an excuse, Tim?
Well, sometimes, it just slips under the couch, you forget about it, and you're like, no. Or, maybe they just played Bloodborne and we're like, oh, man, no, we've got to redo this. I want to give Link a big oiled up coat.
Cover him in
giant
blood.
Blade thing, yeah.
I don't have a problem with the developers taking as much time as they need to make it good, because remember, Ocarina of Time was delayed substantially as well, and we don't remember that. We just remember that it's like one of the best games ever made. So I hope that's like the principles that they're sticking to there.
Given my experience on partly finished games as well, I do not understand the people's desire to play the games earlier anymore. I know what they're like when they're earlier. You don't. If a company doesn't want to give you the game yet, then it means it's way too early.
Yeah. But they did make the mistake, I think, of showing off that initial reveal a bit too early.
Yeah.
When they thought it was going to be released at the end of this year, that was a good time to show off that really beautiful teaser trailer, when it was just really amazing, wasn't it, Lee?
It was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just sparked all of our imaginations, and now we have to wait even longer, and there's a bit of, maybe consumer frustration like Lee's experiencing now.
That's what I've got right now. A raging case of consumer frustration. Yeah. They did earlier, one of the other previews for this game, they mentioned that there was going to be a Star Fox game coming out before this. I had hoped that in announcing that they were pushing that back, they could have said anything at all about this supposed Star Fox game. The people have played, but no one has said anything or shown us any part of it. I just really wish Nintendo would tell us anything at all about anything that they're working on at any time.
Of course, the mystery will be solved when Zelda finally comes out and you're flying an R-Wing.
Yeah, that's true.
Alrighty, that's it for this week in Gaming News Headlines. You're listening to Z Games on Triple Z 102.1 FM. At the beginning of the show, we heard from Sex Bomb, who are a fictitious band, right, Jody?
They're real in my heart, right?
But they're from the movie Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Yes, that's right. And that was We Are Sex Bomb.
This next one is by Courtney Barnett. And how is this one video game related, Jody, or did you just pick it out of a hat?
She name-checked SimCity. It is totally video game related.
That counts.
Hello and welcome back to Z Games. You just heard Courtney Barnett with Elevator Operator. We're joined by our special guest Tim Dawson from Witchbeam tonight, the animator and programmer who is currently working on Assault Android Cactus. Can you tell us how far along Assault Android Cactus is now?
We actually just hit alpha. We're in early access, so it's kind of live updates as we're going, and that was exciting for us. We alpha's, like, I guess, yeah, gaming terminology gets used a lot, but like alpha for us is feature complete, so every level playable. So for the first time, we've got like the final boss in and playable, and the boss before that. So we've got like the full 25 level campaign, which is nice because it feels like actually finally wrapping things up, and now we just have to go in and wallpaper the walls and put paint everywhere and all that kind of stuff. Kind of finish off the rest.
Yeah, you've been in early access for a pretty long time, right? I mean, You're one of the first early access games that I ever played.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. We came out, it was, I think, right towards the end of 2013.
Yeah, it would be.
It was. Yes. We were in it when we hit 2014. I remember, and it's, we didn't intend to be in early access that long, but yeah, here we are.
Despite being in early access for that length of time, like even when you launched, you have been more feature complete and like more fun and playable than most other games that I've played in early access. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I had this thing that I thought that I felt like if you're going to put a game in front of people, it has to be. I mean, I can't say it's bug free, but it has to be largely bug free. Like nothing staring at you that's going to upset your experience, and what should be there should be playable. Like I don't want to let people play a broken, buggy experience that I know doesn't work and say, well, it'll get better later. It's kind of, but then, funnily enough, I think I may have that wrong because that's what everyone's expectations for early access is, and we're not exactly shooting up the sellers list. So,
well, after this episode, things are going to turn around, possibly even worse.
Well, yeah, we're alpha now. All the levels. It's great.
I think what you need is a survival mechanic, like just the ability to chop down trees.
Yeah, and some zombies.
Yes,
and,
yes.
Yeah. Really glitchy zombies.
That'll shoot you up the charts.
But we were just talking about for the sub-boss, which is the Licorice, who went in recently, which is pretty cool. She's a in the game you're an android, and the rest of the bosses are these big, massive, hulking things, and then Licorice is actually an android, so she plays by your rules, which is kind of one of those, sounds like marketing speak, but the idea of that was she's if she gets knocked down, she can revive just like you, and the only way to beat her is she runs out of battery just like you do, and she can take your power-ups, and she can pick up the pickups, and she can do all the things that you do.
She's a complete piece of... She's a jerk.
She is, by design.
Yeah.
It's great. And she has a primary and secondary weapon. She has a cooldown mechanic just like you, and she has to wait before she can use a secondary weapon. And I was really... Because I'd planned it from the start of the game, which I'm saying was a while back now. And I've spent the whole time wondering if she's even going to work. Like I had backup plans for like what I was going to replace it with when I cut her after she didn't work, and so I was really happy she went in.
What's the response that you've gotten to her?
Good, actually. After we put Justice in, and we had people furious actually at the game and demanding, making all kinds of things, and one person saying, "Have the developers even beaten this boss yet?" They've put a clearly like. Yeah, we have S+ to every character, that's what we do. And yeah, so I was actually really scared that people were going to hate on Licorice, but most people seem to appreciate they don't, we're getting lots of reports that they kick her, that she kicks their ass, but...
It's a really fun inversion of what you've got so far where, you are training people through the levels with the smaller enemies on how to defeat the big bosses, and then suddenly there's this, it's you staring back at you, and you just have no idea what to do with that. It's like fantastic. It's kind of a spoiler that we're talking about it, actually.
A little bit, but I had this epiphany, actually, because I was saying, I kept trying to think if we could actually do this boss and if it was going to work. And then I was playing the Muramasa Rebirth on Vita, and the one right near the end, you have a moment where you actually end up fighting the other character in a kind of mirrored battle, and they use the mechanics just like you do. And you suddenly appreciate how terrifying you are as a character. Like, they've got 3 swords, they've got all these abilities, they're jumping around, they're doing all this stuff, and you have to beat them on the same terms. I just remember going like, man, this feels sublime. This is a great way to finish out this game. I've got to do this. I've got to make Licorice play right. And so I'll back off the cheats. I'll try to make sure that she actually plays properly. And that kind of, yeah.
So she could have been worse, then, is what you're saying?
She could have been more boss-like. She could have been more traditional, I think. But I think she's pretty good at the way she works. Oh, and the dialogue. She's my favourite voice cast, because we cast her with the rest of the characters and recorded her all at the same time. We had to write the lines way in advance, which was scary. And she was my favourite of the voice performances, because she's actually the same voice that does Aubergine, just to spoil everyone's immersion for that. Now you can hear it. But she did this fantastic villain voice, and she's like, she was just really good at it. I was like, so good. And like all of her lines are like dripping venom, and she's just. And so the moment they went into the game, and then she picks up a battery and goes, "This one's mine," and it's like it's going to be the first time that the player ever gets their battery denied from them just by that. And I was like, people are going to hate this so much. It's going to be so good.
I said things that I can't say on the radio. And I can say a lot of things on the radio. Ray doesn't care.
It's okay. Tim drinks your tears and those of all the other Steam commenters who get defeated by the bosses. Yeah. I can't get past Justice.
It took me ages. I was so angry at you guys. Look at him. Yeah. Listeners, he's grinning.
I'm the voice of Justice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's me. It's like, when I say that was your warning, that's me saying that was your warning.
Oh, my God. You're not allowed on the show anymore.
So you guys are obviously working very hard on the game. Do you have any idea of a final release date for PC or console at this point?
I would wish we did. It's coming up. It's coming up hopefully faster than is comfortable. Because we've hit feature complete, so we have all the levels. Now it's just me crunching my butt off, getting the art up to scratch and finishing off the levels and stuff like that. And I have this feeling I'm just going to turn around one day and like look at my to-do list and be like, there's nothing on this to-do list. And I'll be like, I guess we can release. So I wouldn't be surprised if it just kind of sneaks up on us a bit, which is really bad for marketing. And
So Assault Android Cactus is coming out sooner than you'd like.
Yeah, sooner than I'm comfortable with.
Just like drop it over the weekend, like a mixtape.
Yeah. Oh, nice, yeah.
Well, look, I heard Beyonce did this once and it was really successful, so I'm assuming we can just follow the same trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Please do.
More video games should learn from Beyonce.
Yeah.
But fortunately, though, we can play Assault Android Cactus now if you want to. You can head to Steam and buy it for early access.
Yeah, it's available now. It's in pretty good state, I'd say. And obviously, we've got the daily drive, which is it changes every day. It's a daily challenge, which is been a lot of fun. So and it's you can get on that as early as possible and just kind of keep going with it.
So you can potentially be the best person in the world for at least a few minutes.
We're going to turn it into an e-sport once it comes out. It's going to be huge in Korea.
Cool. But you also have releases planned for the PS4, the PS Vita, the Wii U as well?
Yep.
Anything else I'm missing?
No, that's the 3. Yeah.
You mentioned that you had a PS Vita earlier. That's really cool for me to hear because I don't meet many people who have one.
You thought you were the only one.
I thought I actually did. No, Cameron has one. He came in like a couple of months ago. He's got one. But is being able to release it on the Vita just a nice byproduct of PS4 development, or did you specifically target that console because you have one?
So, funny story. There's a couple of things behind that. One, the reason why we agreed, the reason why we signed up for Vita development in the first place was because Sony were really keen for it, and we were kind of a bit like, we didn't know, we weren't getting much traction, and we didn't know if it would kind of like, if that was what it took for us to let us on the PS4. And we're like, because they kept saying, and what about the Vita? And what about the Vita? And we're like, sure, yeah, we'll do the Vita. So we're a little bit, I don't want to say coerced, but we're a little bit coerced into doing the Vita. The other thing, though, is I personally really, really like the thing. So I kind of want to put it on the Vita regardless. And it's funny because in terms of development, PS4 and Wii U are going to share a lot more. The Vita is almost its own thing. We did an early build for GDC last year. We agreed for some reason to show the Vita build before we'd ever tested anything. And that was an education. We found out that it's actually quite a tricky... It's a really interesting console, actually. It's a little bit mobile in some ways, but it's also really powerful. It's really interesting to develop for. Very different. And so it's going to be exciting to get it all working on the Vita. But I kind of want to do it because I like the Vita. I feel like it's underrepresented, and I just feel like out of personal pride now, I don't want to let the platform down. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great, and it looks awesome on the screen as well. With the graphics on the screen's so clear, and the sticks are really good for twin sticks. Actually, surprisingly good.
Cool. Thanks, Tim, for chatting to us. Now you're going to stick around and be our guest panelist for the remainder of the show. Thanks for that as well. You're listening to Z Games. Now, Lee, you and I have been playing Bloodborne, which has been touted as the PS4 killer app. Mm-hmm. It's been made by From Software, who are the guys behind Demon's Souls and the original Dark Souls, games that garnered much praise due to being meticulously crafted games that were also brutally punishing at the same time. So Bloodborne's a bit of a big deal then, right?
Yeah, it's the reason I got a PS4, and I have no regrets now, despite the abject poverty that I have to live in as a result of this purchase. It's exactly what I wanted it to be, and then more, but I am a huge fan of the Souls games, and I find them to be, rather than just they are, as you said, brutally challenging, but I find them to be also more rewarding than any other game in that same genre, and proof that a good game design doesn't necessarily involve adding things. It's all about taking away unnecessary elements until all that's left is just the best game that you can make.
We should preface this by saying that you and I both haven't really gotten too far into the game, so what we'll be discussing right now are just first impressions, but we will return to it hopefully next week to talk about it in more depth. Yeah.
So it is like the Souls games, it's a third-person, behind-the-shoulder combat game where you are engaging in a lot of melee combat against enemies in a big sprawling environment that tends to circle back in on itself. And like the Souls games, it tells a story through the environment and through little pieces of information and through items that you pick up. It doesn't do any overt hand-holding. There's a lot of lore and a lot of interesting character and backstory there, but it's something that you engage in through osmosis rather than big dramatic moments. It's a very isolated experience. It has multiplayer, and yet it's a game that is all about being alone in a hostile but beautiful place. So this one is set in a kind of Gothic Victorian London-ish town called Yarnham, and you are a guy there who has turned up on the night of the hunt because you've got a disease called pale blood that you're hoping to find a cure for, and apparently the only way to cure that is to get some kind of Yarnham blood transfusion and then go out and kill monsters all night long in a trench coat.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Sounds like Victorian medicine.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty good example of Victorian era medicine, actually. Yeah, all about transfusions in general.
Leeches are involved at some point.
Probably, yeah. So as an example of the difficulty or the expectation that this game has of you as a player, the first thing that happens in the game is that you get up out of bed and you are then tasked with beating a werewolf to death with your bare hands. and the game doesn't give you weapons until the werewolf kills you. So, good luck.
That also sounds like a remarkably shorter time to werewolf than The Order.
Yes, yeah, no, it cuts out about 7 hours, I think.
That's not right, because that's how long The Order was.
Yeah.
Zing!
That was a group effort. Yeah.
So what's the combat actually like? Is it very similar to Dark Souls with a lot of rolling around and swinging big swords?
It's a little different. It's a lot faster. Dark Souls tended to be about... you were very cautious in Dark Souls. You wanted to have a big shield, and then you didn't ever want to use that. You just wanted to have it there just in case you messed up anyway, because you wanted to be constantly, like, slowly moving away and then doing these very slow cannonball rolls away from everything. Whereas in this game, nah. Your left hand, you've got a gun, and that's your defensive weapon. And you are super quick. You're very speedy. You can dodge with relative ease. You can do a lot more dodging than you could in the other game, and all of the attacks are quite fast. All your weapons are speedy things that really get the job done. Whereas in the previous game, you felt like you were the most underpowered person in the entire game. Even if you had like a sword twice the size of you, it still took like 4 minutes before you finished your swing arc, so you had to plan well in advance. Here, everything is fast and brutal, and it requires you to play in a very aggressive fashion rather than the terrifyingly defensive one of the other games. So it's a fun switch up, even though it still does feel very much like the other games. So kudos to them. Good work.
There were some really weird monster designs in Dark Souls. Is it similar in Bloodborne, or are you just fighting werewolves?
No, in this one you're fighting incredibly messed up, diseased villages, and then also werewolves and big hulking brutes and these awful giant dog-sized crows that just crawl along the ground on their bellies and other horrible things. It's got a really fantastic aesthetic. I tend to think that like games that rely overly on, you know, drenching everything in black and shininess and stuff like that, like that's just the Unreal Engine effect, and yet this has found new ways to use shiny black on everything. Everything in the game is shiny black, and yet it's gorgeous. They've done a really good job of mining this presumably tapped vein.
I did see a video on the internet, and someone was playing. They were climbing up a ladder in a half cape, and I was watching it swish around, and it looked amazing. I was almost sold just on the animation of a half cape.
Yeah.
Like the top hat. Top hat looks great.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you're a Victorian gentleman or gentlewoman, so all of your outfits are big swishy capes and cloaks and things, and everything that you wear is a top hat or a bowler or like a cool hood. Even though the weapons are inspired by the era, Ray and I both started with the same weapon, then I switched over, but the weapon that Ray has is amazing because it is a sword cane that transforms into a razor-edged whip. And the animation that you perform in order to switch from one to the other is that your character angrily stomps their cane on the ground as if to say, "Good day, sir," which is the only thing to say when you kill monsters in this game. Every single time you beat a boss, you should say that.
Get off my lawn.
Yes. I said good day!
Much of the satisfaction from playing this game is in kind of defeating what seemed to be at first insurmountable challenges. Mm-hmm. And for me, it's a big barrier for entry. I know this game it's been talked about so much, and every review I've read about has been like overwhelmingly positive. Lee, you've talked about Dark Souls 1 and 2, and you've given them like overwhelmingly, thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. But there's always the caveat that these games aren't for everyone.
Yeah.
At the moment, I'm feeling like everyone.
Yeah.
Because like you described, the opening sequence, you wake up from your bed, and then there's a terrifying werewolf in there.
It's pretty big.
And it kills you, And it's just like, okay, that's okay, I can deal with that. But then you're in this labyrinth at the start, like, and there's no save points. If you die, you've started at the start again. But all you have as a form of progression is your knowledge that you've learnt from the previous playthroughs, and that's brutal.
Yeah,
it really is, and especially when you finally make it to close to where the boss is, and then you die, and then you think, oh crap. And I can imagine that. I haven't actually faced against the boss yet, but I can only imagine that it's really super hard. And if I die halfway through, the prospect of going back to the start and clearing out all of those bad guys that took me half an hour to do, that's quite daunting.
Yeah, it's definitely a game where the euphoria you get out of it comes from the idea that you are snatching the whip away from a tormentor and then choking them to death with it. I think how I saw it earlier, and I think that's pretty apt. Like it is very hard initially, but it's like those like Metroid games or Castlevania where you're in a big environment and traversal comes from finding an item that allows you to then reconsider how you use that environment, right? So it's kind of the same thing, except instead of gaining new items, success comes from getting rid of the unnecessary parts of yourself that are weighing you down. Like it is that first stretch. I know exactly what you're talking about. There is a street full of all these guys with torches and pitchforks and axes, and every single one of them is a murderer, and they walk around in packs of 4 or 5, and to hell with those guys. But once you work out what their deal is, like, it is the most amazing sensation, because you know that you have mastered this environment. You haven't just worked out how to like cheat the video game. You know how to use these tools to be better at doing this thing. And it's dumb to use the language of like actual success, of like the mountain climber or the explorer when describing this, but that sense of achievement is very, very similar. You know, it's not like, I beat the boss in Mass Effect 3, now I can kiss the girl as preordained by the story. It feels like you have actually done something worthwhile with your time, even though you absolutely haven't.
See, I always found the thing I really liked about Demon Souls and Dark Souls was how out front they were about, I suppose, normalizing failure and death. It was almost the kind of the caveat of the game was that they had to say, it's okay that you get killed. Look, it's going to happen all the time. It's not. Don't even worry about it. Yeah, that guy came out of nowhere. Sure, yeah, that was unfair, but no, just deal with it. And they had to get that out of the way like early on. And that's why like Dark Souls forces you to die at the start and all this stuff, because they wanted to. It's funny. It seems like a brutal thing, but it's actually a charity or a kindness. Because without that thing, the game would be so much crueler. If you actually felt that every time you got killed, it was bad and it was your fault, and you should have just been a cooler player, then the game would be like agonizing. You wouldn't be able to live with yourself after like half an hour of playing. But instead, the game kind of almost says, yeah, it's okay, it'll happen. Just it's okay. Just get back up. Have another go. Your souls are over there, by the way. No, we didn't bring them back with you.
We've been talking about Bloodborne. Those were just our first impressions. We'll wrap that up now, but we will return to it in an episode in the very near future to continue that.
You are listening to Z Games. We are coming to you live from Brisbane, 102.1 FM. Jody Macgregor, you have been playing Pillars of Eternity.
Yes, sir.
Which is Obsidian's big throwback to the Baldur's Gate games of old, the isometric, pausable combat, massive RPG thing.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And that is basically how they pitched it to Kickstarter, which is how it was funded. It was a record breaker with over 77,000 backers, $4 million. So they got to do exactly what they wanted, which was to make a spiritual successor to those Baldur's Gate kind of games with, as you said, the top-down view, the pausable real-time combat, and the sort of fantasy with a twist kind of settings, the Dungeons and Dragons with some tweaks kind of stuff. And that's exactly what this is, and it's huge as well. I played for 50 hours and then wrapped it up, and there were still side quests I hadn't done and things that I hadn't completed. And then, of course, you can replay it on a higher difficulty with a different character, and Jesus Christ, you could sink your life into this if you wanted to.
You seem like a man who has spent 50 hours in a fantasy realm right now.
Yeah. I made it back alive, but only barely. So it is the kind of single-player fantasy role-playing game where you have 6 characters to manage. Not right from the start of the game, because at the start you make up your own character from scratch. You pick your class and your race and your subspecies and your background. Actually, the character creation is quite fun. It's a neat little mini-game of picking what kind of weird-headed person you want to be.
Which weird head did you go with?
Well, I mean, like there's elves and dwarves and humans and so I picked one of the godlike, who are people who've been cursed or maybe blessed with oddities. So you can have like a head that's on fire, or you can have like a weird mask over your face that makes you look like a bug, or I chose to be blue and have a moon just sort of sticking out of my head.
Right. Moonface.
Moonface, that's exactly what I went with.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to be, weird look. If you have the option to be weird looking, then I am always going to choose that.
Are we insulting Bert Newton right now?
No. He is definitely a race variant within this game. Good timely reference as well, Ray. It is indeed 1989. Did people respond to your moon face?
A few times, but not as often as I was hoping for.
So you were hoping people were like, moon face.
You've got a moon growing out of your head.
Every conversation starts with, what's wrong with your face?
Yeah, I actually restarted as one of the Burning Head people and played through the opening hours as that to see if more people would say, my God, man, your head is on fire. So, no, not really.
So it's weird to you, but not for everyone else, evidently. They're used to godlike.
No, but what they mostly respond to, I found as the game went on, is your reputation. It's a very text-heavy game, like those Infinity Engine games, like Planescape especially, very text-heavy. You will have read a novel worth of text by the time you have finished this game. Some of it voice-acted, but not a lot of it. And when you choose dialogue options, they have like a little invisible modifier on them that will give you a reputation. You can actually turn it on in the options. There are a lot of things you can tweak in the options, so you can see if saying this thing will make you more honest or cruel or aggressive or diplomatic. And those are the things people respond to. No one was like, hey, lady, you've got a moon in your head. But a lot of people were like, I've heard you have a reputation for being honest, so I will trust you and take you at your word. And I don't know how those people knew. Like, those modifiers show up in dialogue that you can have with the 5 companions that you gather with you in your party. So is everyone that I'm adventuring with just a huge gossip? And how are they getting word of my merits to the other side of the map?
It's a fantasy world. It's like a make-believe world where instead of being judged by first impressions, like whether you have a moon in your face or not, it's the content of your character that they're actually paying attention to.
Yeah, but how do they know?
They're judging you on the content of your private conversations with your party members from the other side of the world.
Yeah, they're all just writing letters
living
and
in some sort of fantasy surveillance state.
Yeah.
That actually, I have been playing this a little as well, and that happened to me, and I was quite surprised the first time someone responded to me, because I apparently had been picking the benevolent ones in the first town that you go to, and then I went into the big city and I went into some seedy bar and I sat down beside a woman and she's like, I've heard all about you, I know that you're good-hearted, so here's the real deal with me. And I was like, I don't even know your name. Like, what is this? Like, maybe you've got like a troupe of traveling bards or troubadours who are coming ahead of you, letting everyone know that there's a hero coming so they can like get their quests ready.
You have a heavily subscribed to Twitter feed.
Yes, but it's actual birds.
Yeah, they're just sending ravens from King's Landing.
Yeah. Yes.
So what I like about Pillars of Eternity, or what I liked more as the game went on, is its story and its characters, which I didn't think I was going to like at the start of the game. It's the kind of role-playing game, and it feels almost redundant to say this about a fantasy role-playing game, where you have to get past some opening hours before it really gets enjoyable. At the start of the game, everyone you talk to wants to lecture you about the lore and the history of the setting and about Aora and a deer and the deer woodens and Aethas and all of these names of things that sound dumb. I just want them to shut up. But then, after, it's like you have to eat your vegetables and then you get your dessert.
Yeah.
And I did actually get quite involved in it, especially once you gather your little party of companions and you get to know them, and people who are connected to all of these places and things and gods actually become real people that you start to feel a connection with because their banter is really funny or whatever it is about the characters that you like. And that was when I started to care. And it was worth doing that because it does have a pretty decent pulpy fantasy story to it with enough twists in it to keep me interested. It has a setting that's been sort of advanced slightly from your typical medieval fantasy world. So it's in this early Renaissance thing. So there are gunpowder weapons, but also they have these scientific ideas, but they live in a world where magic is real and everyone reincarnates. And that's a scientific fact that everyone knows. Like, they know that when you die, you come back later. So they treat this in a pseudo-rational kind of way. Like, if someone really important dies and they've reincarnated somewhere else, somebody might track them down to tell them who they used to be in their past life and how amazing they were. So it actually has an impact on the lives of people that you get to know and care about. And that is what's more interesting to me than the difference between Aethas and Beroth. And yeah.
I had the same difficulty as you. I feel like with this, because they're taking a lot of Gaelic influence from the naming conventions for their gods and places and stuff. But the other thing is that there seems to be a lot of like Pacific Islander stuff as well, which I thought was really, really cool. But then with the Gaelic stuff, it's like they've hit the point where every good fantasy name has been taken, and now people are just like, it's my friend, Bethel Lechwen. Like, everything else is trademarked now, so you can't just have a god named Magma the Destroyer. They're just like, Elgahwaz. And I feel bad for them for that. And does that stop getting annoying?
Sort of, or at least you get used to it to the point where you've acquired the taste, and Eglon Foth sounds kind of nice.
Right. Okay.
After a certain point.
But the inclusion of Pacific Island cultural elements in some of their races and in some of the cool South Sea sort of piratey places, I thought that was so good, and it's such a rich setting to mine, and I hope there's a lot more of that somehow.
There is one of those people, the Amoa, who joins your party, and he is one of the characters I like the most because he's like 7 foot tall and has filed teeth, and everyone's slightly scared of him, but he's actually a scholar. He's just a big librarian.
He's also a bard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's great.
So I do like that it has interesting ideas like that are new and that subvert the tropes, because Baldur's Gate was a bit like that, but it was also a pretty traditional fantasy kind of story.
I really loved Baldur's Gate 2, so I'm really looking forward to playing this, but within that game there were a large amount of flaws, I feel. Like, the combat was really clunky, and it was a bit too beholden to the Dungeons & Dragons rule set, I feel. This is a modern game. Have they addressed those flaws?
Well, they've updated those flaws, but sort of kept them. So, whereas Baldur's Gate used the old clunky AD&D 2nd edition rules sort of faithfully, this has a new rule set that they've made up themselves, but that draws pretty heavily on like the 3rd and 4th editions of D&D. What that means for people who don't play D&D is that your characters have things like powers that they can use in every encounter that are separate from powers you can use at every rest. So you'll have a bunch of things like your druid can turn into some crazy big animal and can do that once during every single fight. So they'll spend a few seconds ripping somebody up as a giant cat man or whatever. And then they'll have another ability that you can only use once per day, and then you have to like take a nap before you're allowed to do that thing where your giant cat man attacks twice as fast for a few seconds, or your wizard casts his best spell, or your priest does whatever.
So the old games had a halfway interesting combat system, which sort of felt like a bodge, where, because D&D was turn-based, this was a real-time thing. You would be able to pause to issue new commands and then unpause and see how well your amazing tactics worked out. How have they taken this? Does it still play out as confusedly as the old games did?
Yeah, it basically does. It's not quite as annoying, but it still did manage to frustrate me pretty often, because at the start of every fight, it auto-pauses for you, and you go through all 6 of your characters, and you set them up to, like, you run up here, you're the tank, you go and engage with these guys so they can't get past us, and you ranged characters, you shoot at the caster, and you cast this spell, and you cast this other spell, and you put your little area of effects of each spell down on the map. This circle goes here, and this cone of frost goes over here, and then you press spacebar, and then they just turn into idiots. The pathing is really, really bad, so especially when you're fighting indoors or in dungeons when you're not out in a field somewhere, they will get stuck on corners or just stand on the spot, vibrating and spinning around. Sometimes they'll go the long way around, which either means running through the fireball your other guy just cast, or sometimes they just get lost. Like, they'll walk halfway around an ogre and then sort of get confused and stop, and you have to give them the command again because they got bored. I don't know what happens there.
To be fair, writing pathfinding code's really annoying.
It must be incredibly hard because it's 15 years and they still haven't got it right. So I wish they would have just made it turn-based. Just let me micromanage the guys and move this guy from here to here the way that I want, rather than just clicking from A to B and hoping that they figure it out, because they rarely do. And also, it's the kind of top-down world where there are either flat places you're allowed to go or places with any kind of scenery where you're not allowed to go. So that means if there is a cushion on the floor, they have to go around it, and that's a problem. Going around things is a real big problem.
Yeah. I have been playing the combat. I found it to be not as tedious as the old games. I have been able to sort of apply strategy, and there are times where, like, there's a wizard spell that casts a giant rolling fireball that bounces off things. And that's great. Put that in every game. That's already in your game, Tim. So, well done.
Ahead of the curve.
Yeah, you should sue. But I've also found that most of my planning does turn into just a massive scrum. Like, every time you're like, you're going to go over here and you're going to shoot that guy, and you circle around here, and all that happens is that the two groups just meet in the middle and rub against one another. And no one has solved this yet. That's how every plausible tactical game plays out. And why is it like...
Yeah, no, pausable real-time combat is the devil. So
it's fool's gold.
Yes. The things that I like about this game are not the combat at all. The combat is what I do to get to the good stuff, to the quests that I like. And something that is new that I really enjoy is these little choose-your-own-adventure storylets that happen every now and then, where another game might have a cutscene or a quick-time event to dramatize some weird thing that's happening, whether it's like a monster has grabbed one of your party and is dragging them away, or you have to climb up this wall or solve this puzzle. This little paper scroll will unfold on the screen, and there'll be a black and white illustration and then just a paragraph explaining what's in front of you, and you choose from these options. Well, what do you do? Do you shoot the monster or throw a rock at it or throw your sword at it? And there are different options depending what character you're playing, what equipment you've got. And then the next thing happens and the next, and it's just like working your way through a pick-a-path book. And I really enjoy that. It's so much more fun than just mashing the space bar to climb a wall or whatever.
Yeah, I thought that would actually be kind of a cheap out for them because they've only got a limited budget, but playing it, those are really, really fun, and every time I encounter one, it's added so much value, and it fleshes out the story in a way that the other games never allowed for. Yeah,
it's really fun, and I wish there were more of them. There's one right near the start of the game that I enjoyed a lot, and then it was like quite a while before I got to another one, but every single one of them I have enjoyed, even though there aren't a million of them everywhere.
So I guess you're not surprised that this is well written and well cast, considering the pedigree, and even the fact that the combat is fiddly and tedious, also not that surprising.
Yeah, that's again is exactly what Baldur's Gate 2 was like and what Planescape was like. So I'm glad that occasionally there are options to talk to the monsters or to sneak your way past them or to find a secret door that lets you get around them. I made a deal with some underground people with spiders for heads, so that was nice. I didn't have to fight them after that. You can often talk to the monsters. Not often enough that I didn't get bored of the combat, but still often enough that I enjoyed it. And it is well written, as I said, which is good because it's an entire novel's worth of text to read.
Jody, you've been talking about Pillars of Eternity, which is available now for your PC through Steam. So you recommend this game overall?
Yeah, most definitely. If you are a fan of Baldur's Gate, this is exactly what you have been looking for.
And if you're a newcomer, like maybe if you're 14 years old, never heard of it, what do you think?
Yeah, then maybe look at a YouTube video because you're 14, you don't listen to us anyway, and that will tell you whether you will enjoy this game.
Cool. Thank you very much, Jody. And that's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Zed Games. Big thanks to Tim Dawson, artist and programmer at Witchbeam. Go grab the early access of Assault Android Cactus for your computer. It's really good, and look out for it on PS4, PS Vita, and Wii U later on this year, maybe. Mm-hmm. Who knows? Yeah. But we'll be back next week at the same time, possibly talking about more Bloodborne, possibly talking about video games again. That might be something that happens.
Yes.
But it has been wonderful being on the radio, and we'll catch you guys next week. One more song to take us home, though.
This is Agneta with Get Jinxed.